Good morning, I'm Randy White, and this morning I want to bring you a good word on YouTube from 2 Chronicles chapter 29. Chapter 29 and chapter 30 are about a great reformation that takes place in Old Testament Judaism. King Hezekiah takes the throne and he begins to realize that his fathers have not acted right according to the word of the Lord. And so he begins to call the priests together and call the Levites together and initiate a reformation of Judaism and a restoration of Judaism. And the scripture in verse 35 gives a summary towards the end of that verse. It says, "Thus the service of the house of the Lord was established again." We've heard that judgment begins in the house of God. And here is where Hezekiah began his reform, in the house of God, calling together the priests and the Levites, and thus the service of the house of the Lord was reformed. Well, as goes the king, so goes the priest, so goes the temple, and fortunately, as goes the worship in the temple, so goes the lay of the land, so goes the countryside. And with the restoration of worship in the temple, the countryside began to have a revival. And they were called together to observe the Passover. It's recorded in 2 Chronicles chapter 30. And the Passover had not been observed in many, many years. So all the people came together and they began once again to observe the Passover. And the revival of that Passover was so great that the people decided, let's not stop. And they extended that revival for a 7-day period. Hearts were changed, families were changed, a nation was changed, and God was glorified. In verse 36 of chapter 29, it says that Hezekiah and the people rejoiced because the thing came about suddenly. Suddenly. God did a great work. You know, my friend, I am convinced that God suddenly could do a great work even in America. If the king, the priests, and the Levites, now in American terms, that is the president, the pastor, and the deacons, if they begin to get their heart right with God and come back and begin to reform their ways. In fact, in chapter 30, the scripture says that the priests and the Levites were ashamed. And it's time for pastors and deacons and politicians all across the country to be ashamed and to come back to the reformation of the service of the Lord. And friend, you know what I believe would happen? I believe that suddenly God would do something wonderful. May God bless you today. Have a great day. Thank you.